Hello CAT aspirants, this video is relevant to you only if you have walked a certain journey along the CAT preparation spectrum. So the assumption is by this time you would have evolved as a CAT aspirant, you would have been familiar with the various challenges of the CAT, you would have taken certain tests, you would have probably gone through both sectional and full-length tests, and you have a feedback from the preparation environment about your level of competitiveness, about your accomplishments and the corrective measures which you need to take. Having said that, it is also important to understand that you as a CAT aspirant, you have a certain profile, you have a certain set of strengths and weaknesses, and this is a time which is just 2 months short of the test, so you need to focus more on your strengths and take care of your weaknesses. Typically what we have seen is by this time people get psyched out. There are people who start postponing things, they look at the next test in line, and somehow the entire focus shifts from CAT to other tests. Why? Because it is more of a defense mechanism for them. Why? Because they keep on saying it to themselves that this is not the test for me, I will probably target the next test and look at the next few B schools therefore associated with that test. However, this is a time when you need to take stock of the situation, you need to play on your strengths, and you need to consolidate yourself as an aspirant. So I think with this background, let's start with the strategic approach to how you should approach, how you should therefore manage the CAT challenge at this point of time. We suggest that when you talk about strategy, you need to have a method to madness. You need to break the entire process into a couple of steps and keep the end goal in mind. And in keeping the CAT goal in mind, we suggest that you split the entire process into these 4 steps. The first one is analysis. You need to analyze yourself as a CAT aspirant. You need to see where are the problems, if any. You need to celebrate the good things and sustain the tempo if you're doing well. So I think either ways, you need to analyze the environment in which you are operating. Having said that, if you have a good feedback from the environment, if your performance is good, you need to sustain the tempo, you need to further strengthen your preparation, and you need to ensure that you reach the day of the CAT with this kind of a preparedness. On the other hand, if your performance is not up to the mark, if the practice tests which you've taken, if they show that your level of competitiveness is not as much, then you need to pull your socks, and of course you need to talk it to yourself that there is a problem which you need to work on, and this will take you to the next step, which is problem identification. Now it's very important to own responsibility. It's important to understand that if your performance is not up to the mark, there is surely a problem somewhere. So it becomes your responsibility to identify the problem and then possibly move on to the next challenge. So at this level, let's try to understand the different kinds of problems which you are typically encountered with as a CAT aspirant. The first such problem could be in concepts. You are not able to perform well because somewhere you are not comfortable with the core fundamentals of the subject. You are not comfortable with the basic concepts which surround the topic, and therefore every time a question pops up, there is a problem and you're not able to do as well. For example, say if the question is, what is the least number of digits in the number formed from only zeros and ones such that the number is divisible by 225? I repeat, what is the least number of digits in the number formed from only zeros and ones such that the number is divisible by 225? Now the concept which is required here is divisibility by 225. And the sub-concept is you split 225 into two factors, 25 and 9. So now the next challenge is the application challenge. The application challenge, which assumes that you are comfortable with the concept. You know that this is a concept which involves divisibility rule, which is where you split 225 into two parts, 25 and 9. You know that divisibility by 9 would therefore mean that the sum of the digits should form a number which is a multiple of 9, and divisibility by 25 should mean that the last two digits should be either both zeros or they should form a number which is a multiple of 25. So you know the conceptual part very well, you know the concepts, sub-concepts, but when you start moving from the concept part to the application part, there is a gap. You don't know how to go about it. You have a problem because you have multiple options, you have multiple paths to take. So which is the most the viable path for you becomes a challenge in this scenario. So what you need to do is you need to ensure that this transition from concept to application is smooth for you. If it's not, then it's an application issue. For example, in the question which we've taken up, we have reached this level that the number has to be divisible by both 9 and 25 because 9 and 25 are co-primes, right? So once you reach this level, now you apply this concept and you decide that divisibility of the number by 225 means 25 and 9. Divisibility by 25 would mean the last two digits should form either a number which is a multiple of 25 or they should be both zeros. So we know that the given number should end in 0, 0 because the only other scenario is 1, 0, 0, 1 or 1, 1, and all these will not form multiples of 25. But this condition, as in the last two digits being both zeros, will make the number, whatever is the preface, it will make the number divisible by 25. And now you apply divisibility by 9. Divisibility by 9, we know that only ones will add to the sum. Zeros will not contribute to the sum. So how many ones do you need to have so as to make it a multiple of 9? The least such number of ones is going to be 9 ones. Why? Because these 9 ones will add up to 9, which is the first multiple of 9. So the number which we're talking about is 9 ones and 2 zeros, which means the number of digits in the number is 11. Hence 11 is the answer. So you look at the application part. How do you make a transition from concepts to application? And then of course the last problem gets manifested in the testing part. It is possible that you are comfortable with concepts. You are able to apply the concepts in a certain way so as to arrive at the answer. So you are effective. But somehow when this question appears in a set of other questions, when this question is put under a certain time constraint, when this question is branded as a CAT question, you have a problem. So the problem is your test taking skills. Now whether it's an issue of time management, whether it's an issue of prioritization, whether it's an issue of stress management, all these are challenges which are related to testing. So I think so far we have been able to do the analysis, we have been able to identify the problem, and the next step now, the third part, is taking a remedial action plan. Once you reach the level that there is a problem and this is the problem, once you identify the weakness, you need to work on it and you need to take a corrective measure. Unless you take it, your problem identification will do no good to you. So the remedial action plan depends on what is the type of problem you're encountering. So if the problem is in concepts, we advise that you go back to those areas which are concept sensitive, which are driven by concepts. And I'm talking about two critical areas here. One is quantitative ability, which is also known as discrete mathematics, problem solving, and the other is the verbal part, where particularly we talk about usage and grammar. So these are the two areas of the test which are critically dependent on concepts. So if you have a conceptual issue, then the possibility is that one of these domains is a problem domain. So you need to go back to the respective domain and take some kind of a corrective measure. For example, if it's quantitative ability, then you need to understand whether it's an arithmetic issue, algebra issue, a geometry issue, or a modern math issue. See, for example, if you talk about geometry and the question starts off with something like this, in a cyclic trapezium, and you have no understanding of what is a cyclic trapezium, then you have no reason to take the question forward. Then we suggest that you pull out and you invest this kind of time in some other question, right? But before this happens, you need to be aware of the various concepts which are making that domain critical to you in terms of the concept sensitivity. Of course, a similar logic is applicable to the verbal part, where reading comprehension would not be a concept-driven domain. Critical reasoning is not, again, a concept-driven domain, but your usage and grammar is where you have the application of conventional inputs, and certain concepts need to be appreciated. So if the problem is concept-driven, you need to go back, revisit the concept, and take some corrective measure. The second possibility is that the problem, as we discussed, the problem is more application-driven. So if this is the issue, if you think that the problem is moving from a concept to the application stage, then you need to take more practice questions for that particular topic. You need to work on at least say 80, 85, 90 questions which put across the challenge of application as a test taker, and you will feel that the confidence level is going up. So the suggested remedy for this stage is you need to practice with respect to more questions on that particular topic, on that particular chapter, that particular domain. And this is the only way that you will improve your application skills. Otherwise, it will keep on becoming a vicious circle, and you'll go back to stage one all the time, which is concepts. And you'll start wondering, what is wrong with me? My concepts are pretty much in place, still my scores are not upbeat. So this is the culprit, and practice across a certain number of questions would be the way out. And then, of course, the testing part. The test taking part is the third problem which we discussed a while back. If this is the problem, then you need to understand three phases. The phase before the test, the phase during the test, and the phase after the test. So before the test, you need to ensure that you have been through the first two parts of the challenge, that is concepts and application. So test taking should typically start after your conceptual part is in place, after your application skills are pretty much in place. So this is the phase before writing the test. Then the test phase comes. You are writing the test 3 hours or 2.5 hours whatever the given duration is. Now you're writing the test under a lot of challenges. The challenge could be more of time management. So you need to understand a judicious distribution of time amongst the sections, unless there is a condition which says that you have been confined to this section for this kind of time. Then of course the sectional time distribution is taken care of. Within the section, again, time management becomes a huge thing. We have seen so many students who get stuck, or I would say emotionally attached to certain questions, and then they mess up the entire time challenge there. Then of course the problem could be in terms of prioritization. You are not picking the right questions. Or shall I say that you are not able to prioritize the right choice of questions. So what comes before the other someone is very important here, because if you are able to pick the right questions initially, the comfort level goes up, the confidence gets stronger, and you approach the subsequent questions with more energy, verve, enthusiasm. So prioritization could also be one of the issues there. And then of course something which is very typical of the test is stress management. You are under a lot of stress and you have to accept it. You are under stress because of so many reasons. It's an important day for you. This is a gateway to those B schools which are very aspirational for you. So stress is going to be there. It's an inherent nature of the test. What you need to do is manage it. So how would you manage it? If your time management and prioritization skills, these are in place, and if your overall test taking skills are in place, if you have taken similar tests previously. Now I'm talking to both first time test takers and repeaters. The repeaters would obviously have an experience of a previous CAT, but the first time test taker would have taken a lot of practice tests in the preparation journey. So a certain optimum number of tests is what we advocate, and this number will ensure that your stress gets managed well and you come across as a more confident person. So this is the duration during the test. Now comes the stage after the test. Now what we have seen is people normally forget. They take the test, they get a score, they accept the score, and that's about it. But what they fail to understand is the post-test scenario. The post-test scenario is very, very critical, and you need to ensure that if the test is for X minutes, then you are spending at least 2x minutes for the feedback part, for the analysis part. I would say it yet again, if the test is for X minutes, then your analysis should be for at least 2x minutes. If we take a 2-hour test, you should spend at least 4 hours to understand what was right and what was wrong. And we'll give you a basic a tree, an analysis tree, to understand how you should proceed with the analysis part. Say the number of questions in the test is Q. You take the test, and as a fallout of this event, there are two possibilities. Either there are questions which you attempt, or there are questions which you don't attempt. Now let's look at the questions which you attempt. There are two possibilities. One, the questions which you got right, and the other, the questions which you were not able to get right and therefore wrong. Now the right part is also important for you to analyze, but I think the focus is more on the wrong part. So the wrong part, again, two possibilities. Did you get the wrong answer because it was a fluke, it was a guess, or it was an effort which had gone wrong? So wrong effort. I repeat, the wrong part needs to be analyzed in two ways. Those questions which you guessed and therefore you were not able to hit the right answer, and those questions which were wrong because the effort was not correct. Now, if the effort was not correct, then we have three possibilities again. Either it was a conceptual problem, or an application problem, or a test taking problem. And then a corresponding corrective measure has to be taken as explained previously. If it was a guess, then of course the big question here is, why did you feel the need to attempt such a question when there were other questions which you did not attempt? So this possibly increased your opportunity cost and kept you away from the non-attempted questions. And those questions which you were able to get right, again, two possibilities: guess and right effort. If it's a guess, then of course you need to go back to the question and you need to work on the whole challenge more intrinsically and see whether you're able to get the question in place or not. If it was a right effort, then of course the challenge is, how much time did you spend to get the answer? So I think this part needs to be analyzed in terms of efficiency. Now let's look at the non-attempted part. We suggest that if there are questions which you could not attempt in the given time frame, you need to put yourself in a testing situation again and focus only on these questions. And then again, the fallout will be attempted, non-attempted. And then you can repeat the analysis as shown previously. Now, this kind of an activity will take a lot of time. What happens is, the student is probably shying away from this kind of an effort. So he or she just writes the test, gets a score, and accepts the score. But what possibly he or she is failing to understand is that this analysis is critical for closing a loop, something which we call a remedial action plan. Now let's look at the next, the fourth step in this challenge. So far, we have tried to understand the analysis part, the problem identification part, the remedial action plan part. And now the last part is ensuring a control mechanism. The first three steps need to be repeated in a certain way. A cycle has to be formed and a mechanism has to be in place. This mechanism is a control mechanism. So this is where you would need a lot of discipline. Now, this strategy which we are talking about 2 months before the test becomes all the more critical in terms of discipline, because if this is in place, then all the activities which we have previously talked about will happen in a certain way. And if they happen in a certain way, results are bound to improve. We fail to accept it when somebody says that put in an effort, but it's not being reflected. If you put an effort, then possibly you went wrong somewhere. The effort was not put in the right direction, or the discipline part was not pretty much in place. One of the 4 steps of the strategy would have malfunctioned. Either the analysis was not correct, or you were not able to identify the right problem, or you were not able to take the right corrective action, or the control mechanism was not strong enough. So if these 4 things happen, we assure you that your scores will improve, and even if you are 2 months short of the test, there will be some light of hope there, and you can come across as a smarter CAT test taker. Thank you and best wishes.